Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram, and MeWe. And of course, be sure to visit mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Perkovich, and this is episode number 400. A pivotal episode in the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast history. Even though I know all the hard work that's put in these podcasts and the numerous interviews and numerous shows, it's just really kind of dumbfounding to just think that I've made it to episode number 400, especially since a few years ago I kind of stepped away from the whole podcasting game. But since then, of course, I've come roaring back and tried very hard to get like a few episodes up a week, and here we are to number 400. And I was thinking to myself, what is something really kind of cool I could do for, celebrate the 400th episode of the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. And I had a few ideas, and I thought that the best thing to do was kind of like an Ask Me Anything, where I can get people on my social media, whether it be Facebook or wherever else, just ask me questions. And because I love answering questions, I love when people who read my content and watch my videos, listen to the podcast, really reach out and ask me questions, and that dialogue is there. So, and I hope that continues to happen after I answer the questions that were sent to me in regards to episode number 400. So I've got a bunch of questions in front of me now. Let's go through them and have some fun with this. Really kind of off the cuff kind of reactions to these questions that were sent my way. So let's start off now with Lance Vilcek. Lance was actually on my podcast a couple episodes ago. We're talking about the horror titles of 2021. Lance Vilcek, of course, does work over at Arrow in the Head and Joe Blow. Be sure to check out his work on there. I really love his work that he does on that website and YouTube channel, especially the Joe Blow Originals YouTube channel. So the question he asked me is, what were the flicks that really fucked me up as a kid? Which ones got under your skin that weren't the usuals? Jaws, Exorcist, etc. Really good question. So, Jaws I didn't watch until much later. I actually saw Jaws 2 before I saw Jaws. Exorcist, I actually remember when the television commercial for that came out for the first time, was going to appear on Australian TV. I think Channel 9 aired it back in the late 80s, early 90s. And that really did fascinate me. And there were scenes from that film that I remember seeing because my older brother videotaped it back when we used to do that with VCRs, in case anyone under 40 doesn't know what a videotape is. But there's a couple of movies that really kind of messed me up as a kid. They still have an impact to this day. One of them is An American Werewolf in London. One of my favorite films, in my opinion, John Landis's best film. It goes back and forth between American Werewolf and The Blues Brothers, my favorite film from John Landis. But I remember when I was, I think, maybe 8, maybe 9 years old. It was a dark and stormy night here in Sydney, and I was kind of freaked out about the storm. So I asked my parents if I can, sleep in their room. And they said, okay. I remember getting under the covers, and the sound of the lightning and the wind and the rain was kind of, I needed a distraction. So they had a small television set, and I turned it on, nothing but commercials, and then on comes An American Werewolf in London. And it was the infamous transformation scene. And, at that time in my very young life, the movies that I did watch were kind of like, broad comedies and stuff, kid stuff, really. Never saw anything like that. To see a man actually transform into, this creature on screen. I mean, the effects that was in that is in that movie to this day is just incredibly impressive. But to see it with such young, naive eyes that a 7 or 8 year old kid has was something that really freaked me out. And I remember specifically seeing that scene and just it's ironic, I was using the TV as a way to distract myself from my fear of the rain and the lightning of this storm, and to freak me out even more with this transformation scene from this werewolf movie, and it freaked me out even more. And I remember specifically just freaking out and putting the covers over my head, and just like wishing for it to go away. And I think I remember my mum or my father coming in at that point and just like, "Hey, what the hell are you watching?" and turning the TV off. And they weren't very impressed. But yeah, that was something that really, really freaked me out as a kid. Another movie that did the same thing was the Never Ending Story. And it's interesting, I have that film on Blu-ray, but I haven't watched it for a very long time. I haven't shown it to my kids yet. My oldest son is 9 turning 10. My youngest is 6 turning 7. I remember when I watched that when I was a kid that there were scenes in that movie that really freaked me out. That beast creature in the movie, I forgot what the creature's name is. Was it the Nothing? I'm not 100%. But that really freaked me out. There is a connection when you think about it between an American Werewolf in London and that creature in Never Ending Story. And it really went to a phobia that I had as a kid with dogs. I don't have that anymore. I love dogs, but I was always afraid that because looking at these portrayals of dog-like, canine-like creatures in these movies as being really kind of vicious and vile and monstrous and evil. It really stuck with me. So those are two movies that kind of messed me up when I was a kid. And it's interesting. I have the Blu-ray, like I said, of Never Ending Story, and it's rated G. And I remember speaking to my brother. It's like, how the hell is that movie rated G? It has to be a PG at least, because scenes in that movie, even though it is like a fantasy kind of like adventure movie that was aimed towards kids, it's some pretty horrific stuff in that film that I don't think young kids should watch. And I definitely won't be showing it to my children, at least not until they're like maybe 11 or 12 years old. But that's a different subject altogether. Okay, so let's continue on with these questions. So JD, longtime friend of mine, longtime supporter of my work, thank you so much for sending this question to me. So he asked me, if you became a director tomorrow and were given the chance to do a remake of any movie, what movie would it be? So, I'm gonna, I've thought long and hard about this question, and I'm gonna twist the question a bit, if you don't mind, JD. So instead of if I became a director, tomorrow and were given a chance to do a remake of any movie, what would it be? Let's jump in the time machine, and let's say if I was a director, years ago, and I could have remade a movie. In fact, if I could have taken the reins of a movie as it's being made and had the chance with the foresight that I had today to fix it, so it wouldn't be as, I wouldn't call it a mess because I am a fan of this movie, but it wouldn't be derided so bad as it is today. I would love to go back in time to the year of 1990. Well, I guess they're making it in 89, and taken over from Francis Ford Coppola and the work that he was doing on The Godfather Part 3. Now, all cards on the table, I am actually a fan of The Godfather Part 3. I do like the film. But of course, following up from the masterpieces that were Godfather Part 1 and 2, it doesn't compare to those films. But as a film on its own, if you just look at it as a standalone movie, it is rather good. I thought Pacino's performance was excellent. Andy Garcia is fantastic in it as well. Coppola does some really interesting things in the movie. But there are problems with that film. And if I can if I could go back in a time machine and take over the reins, there are a number of things I would have fixed with that film that I think would have improved it tremendously. Let's talk about the first one right off the bat, which is that there is no Robert Duvall in the movie. So the reason why Robert Duvall isn't in Godfather Part 3, in case people did not know, is that he was pretty much pissed off that Al Pacino had been given, I think at that time was like $10 million or so, to reprise the role of Michael Corleone. And Robert Duvall was given a significantly less offer. And you can kind of see where Duvall was kind of upset about this, because number one, at the time, Robert Duvall, is a big time movie star, especially by the time he hit 1990. Al Pacino, people don't know this, hardly worked in the 80s. He took like a 4-5 year break. I think it was a 4-year break from movies. He did a film in 1985 called Revolution, where he played a Scottish revolutionary. It's as crazy as it sounds, and it is as bad as well. I mean, trying to hear Pacino do a Scottish accent is quite something. So the movie Revolution tanked, and Pacino was just like, to hell with this, I'm going back to Broadway, and he did a lot of Shakespeare on stage, and he came back in 1989 to do a movie called Sea of Love, and the following year he does a Godfather Part 3. In that time where Pacino was away from the screen, Duvall really kind of positioned himself as one of the best leading men in Hollywood at that time. He had won the Oscar for Tender Mercies. I think that was in 83 or 84. He had been doing so much great work throughout the 80s. And I'm sure in his mind he was just as equal to Pacino in regards to his status and the money that he deserved. And of course, Coppola didn't give him that money. Duvall passed on reprising the role of Tom Hagen, and he's not in the film. So if I could have gone back in time, I would have given Duvall whatever money he wanted so he could have been in this movie. And what I would have done is I would have had a kind of like a rivalry between Pacino's Michael Corleone character and Duvall's Tom Hagen character. I would have had Tom Hagen breaking away from the Corleone family and starting his own kind of like mob family and being in kind of like a street war with the Corleones led by Pacino. But then on top of that, I would have also had a kind of like a Romeo and Juliet thing in the movie as well, where I would have had the children, in Pacino's case a daughter, in Duvall's case a son, that would have been in love with one another as these mob wars going along, and that right there would have fixed the other problem with the movie. And that is the whole kind of like incest storyline. So those who haven't seen The Godfather Part 3, Andy Garcia plays the role of Michael Corleone's nephew. He's the illegitimate bastard son of James Caan's character, Sonny Corleone, from the first movie. And in The Godfather Part 3, he falls in love with Michael Corleone's daughter, Mary, who was played notoriously by Sofia Coppola. We'll get back to that later as well. And it was really a really weird angle that a lot of people just, even watching it now, it's definitely one of the weakest points in the film, because it's just so uncomfortable. No one wants to see that shit in the film. No matter what type of Shakespearean operatic kind of spin that Coppola kind of put on it. It was just a really odd kind of thing. What I would have loved to have seen is an actor like, say, Sean Penn play Duvall's son, and him fall in love with whoever would have played Al Pacino's daughter in the film. Definitely not Sofia Coppola, and have that be kind of like the love story there. And you can still have Andy Garcia in the movie as a pivotal player, but instead of playing like the Vincent Mancini character, the bastard son nephew, I would have had him play Michael's son Anthony, And then he could have been like, have an intense hatred against Sean Penn's character, protective, of his sister, played by anyone but Sofia Coppola. So Sofia Coppola was kind of like a last-minute replacement for numerous actresses who were to play Sofia Coppola in a movie. And this is the last thing I would have done if I got a crack at doing The Godfather Part 3. I would have definitely not had Sofia Coppola in the role. Winona Ryder was cast in the movie, but she pulled out due to exhaustion at that time. And supposedly there was kind of like other factors in regards to why she couldn't play the role. And Julia Roberts was another person who also was in line to play that role of Mary, but of course she went on to do Pretty Woman. I would have loved to seen an actress like a Marissa Tomei play the role as Mary. So in my version of The Godfather Part 3, you had Pacino play Michael Corleone. He's in a gangster war against his adopted brother, Tom Hagen, played by a returning Robert Duvall, but their children, played by Marissa Tomei and Sean Penn, are in love with one another, kind of like a Romeo and Juliet angle, kind of like, mixed in there. So it's like a crime story mixed with Shakespeare. And then you also have Andy Garcia playing the brother of Marissa Tomei, is really protective. I think a cast like that, a story like that, would have been much better compared to what The Godfather Part 3 eventually became. And like I said, I am a fan of the movie. I think there's a lot of cool things happening in that film. It's just an odd film compared to the other two for reasons beyond the incest angle and Sofia Coppola's performance. There's other things in the film that's kind of odd to it as well. A great movie, but if I could go back in time and remade it, then I would have loved to have the chance to do that, because I think that kind of story would have been something that could have the grandeur of the Godfather series, but also have the kind of like the elements to it as well that people would have expected from a Godfather movie. And to have, Duvall and Sean Penn and Marissa Tomei alongside Pacino and young Andy Garcia would have been fantastic. So JD, that's the movie I would have loved to have a crack at. If I could go back in time and had the power to do so, I would in a heartbeat. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by 80s Tees. 80s Tees is an online retailer of licensed t-shirts and pop culture gear from your favorite movies, TV shows, cartoons, video games, comic books, and musicians. Celebrate your inner 80s nerd and click on the link in the show notes below to get the raddest retro t-shirts delivered to your door. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Loot Crate. Founded in 2012, Loot Crate is the worldwide leader in fan subscription boxes. Loot Crate partners with industry leaders in entertainment, gaming, sports, and pop culture to deliver monthly themed crates, produce interactive experiences in digital content, and film original video productions. No matter what you geek out about, Loot Crate has a subscription box for you. To get your very own exclusive collectibles, apparel, and gear delivered to your door, be sure to click on the link in the show notes below. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is also brought to you by Vudu. Watch the latest movies and TV shows anytime, anywhere. No subscriptions, no contract. Enjoy stunning quality in up to 4K ultra high definition at home, and download and watch on your mobile device as well. To rent and buy from over 100,000 titles or watch thousands of movies free with Vudu Movies on us, be sure to click on the link in the show notes below. Now, back to the show. So Jacob Airy, he was also a friend of Matt's Movie Reviews. He was also on my podcast a few episodes ago. We were talking about the superhero movies of 2021. For those who don't know, he has his own podcast as well and YouTube channel called Studio Jake. I really recommend people check it out. It has his own website as well. The links for all of these, by the way, I'm going to place in the show notes, so you can find any type of links to articles or websites or podcasts I'm referencing throughout the show. So Jacob asked me, what is a movie or movies that you should be required viewing for film students? So this was a very interesting question. Of all the questions I've sent my way, this one I thought about the most. I'm going to choose one film that I think has multiple elements in it that covers a plethora of subjects and lessons that any film student at film school would need to look at. And that movie is The Exorcist. Anyone who knows me knows that I love The Exorcist, one of my top 5 favorite films of all time. In fact, I've been mulling redoing my top 150 movies, something I've been slowly working at and placing it at number 1, because the more I watch it, no matter how many times I've watched it over how many years now, I absolutely love that film. And why I chose The Exorcist is because that is a movie that has so many different things going on in it from a filmmaking standpoint, that I think there's so many lessons that could be learned from it as a film student. First off, people don't realize that the movie is a adaptation of a book written by William Peter Blatty, and he wrote the screenplay as well for the film. That book was huge. I mean, that was a huge, big best-selling book. These days people talk about, Harry Potter's and Hunger Games and 50 Shades or what have you, and how big that film was. The Exorcist was a huge success, the book was. The adaptation that William Peter Blatty did for that, under the guidance of William Friedkin, I think is fantastic. I've read the Exorcist book. It's been a while though, and there's not everything. Adapting books to screen is a really tricky process. But what William Peter Blatty did was terrific, and you needed a director like William Friedkin to be able to step in as well and say, no, we're not going to have this. Let's change it to that as well, because you have essentially, the author is adapting his own book to a screenplay. I'm sure he wants to have everything from his book in there. It's up to the filmmaker to make sure that the words on the page is respectful of the medium of film, and that's definitely something that William Friedkin did. And they, for a long time, even after the film came out and all the success that it had, there was certain quarrels that William Peter Blatty had with William Friedkin because certain things from the book wasn't in the movie. But that's one thing that people can definitely learn, is the process of adapting a book, especially such a successful book, to the screen. Another thing that's really important, I think, in regards to the Exorcist movie, is that it's a film in which it has a lot of patience in regards to how its story unfolds. I think a lot of people, especially say like the younger generation of film watchers, have a problem with the film because it starts off really slow and nothing really happens in regards of the whole demonic possession aspect of the film until like an hour into the movie, which is crazy this day and age. Like, you watch a Conjuring movie and the first scenes or the first sequences in the film is just like wall-to-wall jump scares, etc. That's just the tone of filmmaking that a lot of people are used to these days. So when it comes to The Exorcist, it comes across really slow, and I think that's a really important thing for filmmakers to learn today as well, especially young filmmakers. I think a lot of films these days kind of get really like into it straight away, and I like films that really kind of set their pace. And so when those things happen in the movie that are scary or what have you, there's a lot of grounding beforehand. A movie like Hereditary does a great job with that. It's a film with similar themes as The Exorcist, and it's also a film that kind of takes its time at the start of the movie. Another thing that students can really learn about in regards to The Exorcist is working with makeup effects and feature effects, especially in regards to genre filmmaking. And of course, The Exorcist has some of the best makeup effects ever put to screen from the great Dick Smith. the work that he does in that movie, working with Linda Blair, turning this 12-year-old child into, a demonic force that is just repulsive in her look, with the texture of the skin and the teeth and the eyes and the hair and everything. I think that's a very important thing that filmmakers need to learn about as well, and how to capture that on screen. Working with a great cinematography as the film has, Exorcist film has working. It's a movie where you have where Friedkin had to work with a child actor in Linda Blair, who at the time I believe was like 11 or 12 years old. That's important lessons to be found there. And it's also a movie in which filmmakers need to learn what not to do on set, which of course, in 2022, I think there's more common sense in regards to what not to do on set as compared to the filmmakers of the 70s and before that. And for people who don't know, William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist, was notorious for his unorthodox methods of getting genuine reactions from his cast. He would do really crazy shit like fire a gun off camera to get reactions from his cast, to kind of like make him jump when he needs them to jump. There is a couple scenes where he actually used physical violence to get reactions from his cast. So there's two famous stories from the making of that film. The first is at the end of the movie, and spoiler alert for those who haven't seen The Exorcist, but it's been how many years now, how many decades, and if you haven't, please do. When there is a pivotal death in the movie at the conclusion of the film, a priest, a real life Catholic priest by the name of William O'Malley, he plays the role of Father Dyer in the movie, and he's confronting the deceased person, or the pseudo-deceased person, in giving him the last rites. And in doing so, he's shaking and he's sobbing and he's crying. The problem was that while Friedkin wanted William O'Malley to have that reaction on screen, he's a priest, he's not an actor. He doesn't have the training to kind of evoke that kind of emotion on screen. So William Friedkin pretty much looks at William O'Malley and he says, Father William, do you trust me? Guy in Father O'Malley, in his foolishness, said yes. And William and Friedkin slaps the shit out of him, like Stockton slap Nate Diaz slap across the face. At which this priest is shocked and repulsed and crying, and then William Friedkin says action, and he has him in this state of shock and high emotion, and uses that to get the emotional context needed on the screen. Another infamous scene that happened in the movie is in regards to the film's lead actress, Ellen Burstyn. Legendary actor she is, but to this day she has a back injury, which came from the set of The Exorcist. So there's a scene in the movie where Linda Blair, in full-on possession mode, throws her mother across the room, and the mother is played by Ellen Burstyn. To get that violent act, that violent, thud to the floor, and to see her be pushed back at a really kind of aggressive way, William Friedkin actually got the members of the crew, to tie a rope around her waist and tug her with all their might to the floor to replicate that violent act on screen. And they did so, and it looks great on screen, but also you will see on screen is the reaction from Ellen Burstyn, which is just utter pain, because she really hurt her back really bad. She hit the floor, she screams straight away, her hand goes to her lower back. And the crazy thing about it is that here is this award-winning actress screaming in pain from this injury on set of her movie, and William Friedkin actually used that footage in the movie. It's effective, it works, but there is no way in hell any filmmaker would do that today, not unless they want to be cancelled and blacklisted. And in fairness to William Friedkin, for good reason as well. So The Exorcist has so many elements to it that I think that it will be a great film for film students to study and to examine and to look at, because it covers a lot of different subjects and a lot of different filmmaking techniques. And also, it's a great film and should be seen by more people as well. So Leanne, another long-time fan of Matt's movie reviews, a former workmate of mine from way back, always a supporter of Matt's movie reviews. In fact, she's a patron of the website for everyone out there. If you want to be a patron, and you can request reviews or top 10 lists, etc., video reactions, receive exclusive content. I'm going to have my Patreon page link in the show notes, and I'd love it if you could to help me out in making sure that I can have this content up, and I can support myself while making this content. But she asked me, if you were suddenly teleported to another land, world, planet, alternate universe, where would you teleport to and why? Very interesting question. So I had a thought about it, and there were obvious movie, universes, worlds that popped in my head. Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, etc. And when it comes to a lot of these places, whether it be Middle Earth or the different planets that Star Wars inhabit or what have you, there's, on one end, I thought to myself, how cool would it be to hang around these Jedis and wizards and all of that? But then at the same time, there's a flip side to that coin where I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but then you're going to be hanging around all the kind of like the evil creatures and etc., space aliens, or the orcs and elves and things that will kill you, and dragons and all that stuff. So I don't think I would want to be be teleported to those worlds. But a world I would love to be teleported to, and for those who know me, they'll understand this answer. I would love to be teleported to and live in the world of the Rocky universe. How awesome would it be to live in a world where a figure like a Rocky Balboa, who practically, fought political wars in the ring in regards to the Cold War, who personified the underdog getting his due, who, took part in wars in the ring that inspired the nations and inspired people, much like the movies did. But talking about the character itself and within its world, how cool would it be to live in that world? Where there's been a Clubber Lang and an Ivan Drago and an Apollo Creed, and from that context as well, I guess the Creed movies would be the same world. As a boxing fan myself, I'm a big time boxing fan. However, the boxing as a sport I love, but boxing as a entertainment, as an industry, is incredibly frustrating because there are so many different belts and so many different promoters, and there are all these dream fights you want to see that will never happen because different fighters are signed to different promotions, and it just never happen. But in the Rocky movies, a lot of that stuff doesn't seem to hold much sway. So I think it'd be fantastic to live in the Rocky universe, where not only will there be a figure like a Rocky Balboa that can be incredibly inspiring, and I think that's something our world needs right now, are inspiring figures. I think there's so much negativity, so much hate, so much division, that to live in a world where there's a Rocky Balboa, I think that would be incredible. And not only that, as a boxing fan, I would love to be able to see that type of boxing fighting in a real world context. So yeah, Leanne, I'm going to say the Rocky universe. And for those who know me, they know that I love the whole Rocky franchise. I'm a big Stallone fan. Rocky Balboa, hands down, my favorite movie character. There's no denying I just love it. I love that character. I love what Stallone has done with it. So yeah, that's my answer to Rocky universe. All right, so we're going to go to the last question now. Robert May, so a long-time friend of mine and supporter of Matt's movie reviews. He had a really interesting question, and it's something that I have pondered doing myself. But his question is, with the quality of television, and he listed shows like Yellowstone and Billions, etc., have you thought about adding TV shows to my review roster? So, the problem that I have in my life is that I get so many films and things sent to me, and I have so many interviews to do and writing and articles, etc., is that often I find myself not even with enough time to watch the movies that I need to watch. And adding TV to that I would just be watching content and not writing about it. I would absolutely love to have to review TV shows, etc. But it will take away from all the work I want to do with movies. There's so many movies I haven't watched yet. There's so many people I haven't interviewed yet. There's so much video content I want to create that if I took on television as well, television these days is incredibly fantastic in its storytelling and performances, and also incredibly addictive. I'm just afraid that if I did that, I'll just overburden myself and burn out. I'm trying really hard with my life to make sure that I deal with the stress of my job, the stress of staying on top of my work and the anxiety that comes with that. I don't want to overload myself. So Rob, I would love to watch these shows. Yellowstone, I've only seen like 4 or 5 episodes, and I want to watch more of it. I just don't have time to do so. The only time I can watch like TV shows these days is when I'm doing the dishes. That's pretty much it. So I got that brief period there where I can watch a TV show. I don't like to watch movies so much when I do the dishes. I just want to watch something that's, something I can watch on a small screen, because I watch it through my Samsung phone. So that's the answer right there, Rob. If I could do if I had a cloning machine, like in that movie Multiplicity, that Michael Keaton movie, I can make 5 or 6 of me, I would absolutely do TV, and I would love to do reviews about heavy metal as well, heavy metal music, and do reactions to those and so many other things. But it's just literal me, and only get 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you know what it's like, Rob. We're family men, we're dads, and that takes a lot of commitment as well. So love to do it. I just can't. I can't add on the burden of it. Who knows? Maybe in the future I will, but highly unlikely. So that was the last question in this episode number 400. Ask Me Anything. Thank you everyone who asked me these questions. Close friends of mine and followers of the show, and always supporters of my work, and always there to kind of help me out when I make a call out for these Ask Me Anything episodes. It is much appreciated. I hope that my answers were satisfactory. I hope that were good for everyone out there listening as well. Please make sure to check out the links in the show notes. I'll put links to any references to people's content and work, and any articles that I reference as well. And also be sure to check out all my links to my affiliates and to my Patreon as well, so you can help me out in keeping this show alive. I'm on episode number 400. I want to make it to 500. I think I can do that maybe by the middle of this year, because I'm working right now and trying to get 3 to 4 episodes a week. So yeah, let's see if we can get it done. Until then, I thank you all for listening, and time to start working on episode number 401. Bye. Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.